Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to talk about the third episode of Gilmore Girls with you. It is entitled Kill Me Now. It was first aired October 19th, 2000, and I have my handy dandy, the Gilmore Girls companion to read to you the summary of it. But actually, before we get into that, if you're new to my channel, then hi, I'm Shelly. I am a Gilmore Girls fanatic. I mostly talk about books and reading on this channel, but I also wanted to bring in one of my passions, Gilmore Girls. So if you're enjoying the vibe, I would encourage you to subscribe. Without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. Let's get into the synopsis. Okay, forced to choose a sport at Chilton, Rory, urged by Emily, picks golf, which Richard reluctantly teaches her at Emily's insistence. Richard and Rory bond over country club life and M.L. Henkin, seeing the strained relationship between a mother and her twin brides getting married at the Independence Inn reminds Lorelai of the special relationship she has with her own daughter. As Emily points out, Lorelai is indeed afraid that Rory will fail to see her grandparents in the same poor light that Lorelai herself has. The opening scene is one of the famous Friday night Gilmore dinners, and I learned from Kelly Bishop's memoir that Kelly Bishop, and Ed Herman would often be right on time for the filming session, and everybody else would kind of meander in. So there she would be at one end and Ed Herman would be at the other, and they would sort of just smirk and smile at each other. She said that it was never an annoying thing, it was never a kind of thing, but it was just always hilarious that they were the two that were always sitting end to end looking at each other waiting for everyone else to show up. And they figured out that it's because Ed Herman and Kelly Bishop have a background in theater, and in theater, when they say the show is going to start at a certain time, you better be on stage because that show is going to start whether you're there or not. So as a theater person, you learn, it's ingrained in you that you need to be on your mark at the time that they say the show is going to start. But as an actor, you can kind of wander in whenever, if the show is supposed to, well, not the show, but if the scene is supposed to be filmed at 10, you'll meander in and 10:10, 10:05, 10:08, 10:12, that's fine. But if you're a theater person, you're like, oh, if it's gonna start filming at 10, then I need to be there at 9:55 to make sure I don't miss the start of the film, the start of the filming session. And so I thought it was so funny that they had that, they had that in common, and they understood that about each other in relation to the other actors. So in this particular episode, Lorelai the first, which is Richard's mother, is referenced. And Richard is funnily talking about her in a very nostalgic, like she's past kind of way. And we later find out, which is kind of a mishap, again, one of those little quirks, because Lorelai the first is alive and well. She shows up in several episodes, but according to this episode, it seems like she is no longer around. But I just thought that was funny. He talks about her in like this past tense kind of way. Another one of the things that starts is that Emily employs so many people, so many maids, but so many people. And for her and Richard, they're like, oh yeah, that one, and you mean the one that stomped? No, the one that sang. They're just having this conversation about the former maids they've had in their lives, and Lorelai is the only one to be like, this is weird. That most people just can't have a casual conversation of all the people that they've employed in their household for their life. I think it's funny because in a lot of ways, Lorelai, especially with her parents, she plays the jester, somebody who's cracking a joke, but really is truth-telling among it all. As I read in the synopsis, Rory's got to do a sport, and one of my favorite little bantering lines that I remember, it sticks in me. I'm like, oh yeah, that line. And Lorelai says, I told her to go out for the debating team, and Rory says, I told her it's not a sport. And Lorelai says, it is the way the Gilmores play. I thought that's great because they're always at each other, and also it works. That line works really well because Amy Sherman Palladino, our writer, director, often mostly writer, showrunner, she is just all about the quippy dialogue. So to say that debating is a sport really falls in line with her kind of writing. So with this whole sports thing, Emily uses it to be quite manipulative. She is like, Richard, take Rory to the club. Rory is, she's just so quiet and sweet. She doesn't say anything. But Lorelai can see from a great distance that Emily is working the pieces so that Richard and Rory go to the club together. And she doesn't like that. She doesn't like that her mom is inserting herself in Rory's life. And then which is so funny because Emily can see that Lorelai doesn't like it, and Emily really feeds into, well, let's see who the controlling one is now, because now she's like, well, you won't even let your own daughter go to the club with her grandfather. That seems like a rather normal activity. Now, which one of us is being controlling? So it's like the tables turn, which is just so good. So since Emily says that Lorelai is being controlling, Lorelai lets go of control and says that, of course, Rory can go to the club with her grandfather. But then you start to see Lorelai spiral, well, not necessarily spiral in like a classic way, but you see her insecurities seep out, and it grows because essentially Lorelai believes and assumes that she raised a daughter who would see the club life as pretentious and foolhardy and cheesy, boring, all of the above. That she raised a daughter who would see that in club life. And so you see Lorelai not being able to hold space for Rory to enjoy this club moment, to enjoy this kind of lifestyle. She assumes that she's like, I didn't raise that kind of daughter who would like those things. And so you see throughout the episode that she's assuming that Rory's going to have a horrible time at the club, just as Lorelai, as a child at Rory's age, had a horrible time at the club. So she's like, Suki, can I take home a piece of that giant chocolate cake? Rory's gonna need it. She's spending the entire day with my father at the club. Meanwhile, when we see Rory actually at the club, there is some awkwardness between Richard and Rory, because we get the sense that they never really spent one-on-one time together. But then Rory, she nails these lines so well, but she's so curious. She's curious about Richard's job, and not in a surface level way, but she's like, no, but what do you actually do? She mentions for the first time that she wants to backpack through Europe. And that is something that we see them continue to reference throughout future episodes. And then we also see Richard brag about Rory. He's like, she goes to, to his golfing buddies, she goes to Chilton. And they also connect over just gossip. Like Rory's able to listen in to the women, gossiping, and she brings that back to her grandfather, who finds that very, juicy and wonderful. There's kind of like two side storylines going on, one of which is that there is a wedding happening at the inn. We get the mother of the two brides, it's a twin wedding, who doesn't like her girls. We see Lorelai be fantastic at her job. And then we see this argument, one of many arguments, of Suki and Jackson arguing over some sort of produce. So those are like the two storylines, the wedding and then the argument over produce. And it's supposed to, the wedding is a juxtaposition. The wedding of these twins is and the way the mother interacts with her daughters is the juxtaposition of the relationship that Lorelai and Rory have, which is pretty smooth and seamless, and it's a good relationship versus a terrible relationship that this other mother has with her daughters. So, it's showing that contrast. And then also we see Kirk as like the swan guy. He's not called Mick. He doesn't even have a name, but he's Kirk. He's not even Kirk in this episode. He's just the swan guy. The show would have been really boring if Rory just agreed with Lorelai the entire time. But we see Rory starting to come into her own. She has her own thoughts and opinions. And so one of the things is that Lorelai, again with this chocolate cake, comes into Luke's and's like, here's this chocolate cake for the horrible day that you had. And Rory's like, actually, it wasn't bad. I actually had a good time. And that really makes Lorelai uncomfortable. She, a little bit later on, Lorelai says, you went golfing, so that can count as a Friday night dinner. And Rory's like, actually, no, because Grandpa and I talked about a book that I wanted, and I actually want to go to dinner. And so again, she is not on board with what her mother is pitching. And that really starts to, I think, freak out Lorelai, because again, Lorelai is assuming I didn't raise a daughter who would enjoy Friday night dinners, which is just really unfair. You know, as a mother myself, it's like, that's really unfair, you know? But I mean, you also have to understand that like your kids aren't these little beings that you mold exactly to your liking, that they have their own thoughts and opinions and beliefs and struggles. And I think that, you know, that's hard. That's hard sometimes to swallow, especially when you have such a when you have such strong opinions towards, I think, a certain lifestyle or a certain culture or a certain way of living, which Lorelai does towards her parents, and that kind of snooty, pretentious lifestyle that she feels like they have. And then it leads into my least favorite part of the episode, and it's when Lorelai picks a fight, and she fights over the sweater, and she was like, "Is that my sweater? Well, you could have at least asked to use my sweater. I asked you to ask me when you want to borrow one of my sweaters." And then they do this thing where she's like, "You're gonna stretch my sweater out because your boobs are way bigger than mine." And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, to me, that was like the hair too far. I think she could have just picked a fight about the sweater, but to me, it was like Lorelai comes out as like a 16-year-old saying, "You're gonna like my sweater is gonna be stretched out because your chest is bigger than mine." I was just like, oh my gosh, train wreck and awkwardness. Ugh. And then at the end of it all, the wedding comes together, this wedding that they've been planning for the entire episode. And Lorelai admits her wrongness to Rory, which again is a good parent move. It's a good parent move. You know, everybody's not perfect. I'm not perfect. And when I mess up, I try and apologize to my kids to say, like, this is what happens when you mess up. This is what happens when things are not great. And so, you know, she admits, I just never thought that, you know, you would like these things, and I think she starts to begin to understand that she has the capability. Lorelai has the capability to hold space for her daughter liking some of these things. So, in the end of the episode, you know, Rory and Lorelai bring this dessert into a Friday night Gilmore dinner, and Emily delivers one of her famous lines, and she's like, well, Lorelai admits this is leftover dessert from the wedding, and Emily goes, "You brought us used dessert?" I love it. I'm going to try and rapid fire the references. So we have Bob Barker, The Price is Right Bob Barker, Antonio Banderas, really snooty double mint commercial. When that happens, when the twin girls getting married are actually getting married to twin boys. There is a mention about NSYNC, the boy band NSYNC. Pepe Le Pew. Peyton Place, which I had to look up. Richard and Rory are at the club. They're talking about the drama that is unfolding at the club. And he was like, this is more like Peyton Place, which is a 1964 drama that ran for 5 seasons. So there was that. In the twins' wedding, they were saying that one of the girls wants Samuel Barber, John Cake, Philip Glass, and the other one wants Shania Twain's I Feel Like a Woman. So the twins are very opposite in their tastes. There is also a mention of an exact book, Mencken's Christophany, which is a selection of Mencken's writings. Like, he selected his own writings. He curated his own writings in this book. There is a reference to Thelonious Monk, Madonna and Sean Penn. She's like, do you know what, Lorelai's like, do you know what I'm thinking about right now? And Rory goes that Madonna and Sean Penn should get remarried. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that Madonna and Sean Penn were ever married in the first place. So there's that. Sister Sledge is played at the end, and the mother of the twins is like, I gotta go, get on the dance floor because Sister Sledge is playing. And then there is also a reference to MTV, and then Mencken, the same Mencken from Mencken's Christophany, oh my gosh, I can't do it. Okay, so they talk about Mencken's memoirs. Richard is all excited because now he and Rory have this connection, and he goes, do you know what I have? I have Mencken's memoirs that I want to show you. And then she's like, oh, and to be honest, I'm a big literary nerd, and I don't know who Mencken is. So if you all know who that is, let me know. But that's it for me. I just love the show. I love it so much. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all in my next one. Bye!